Hello, everyone. This is Lee Andrews, and I thank you all for joining us today on Live with Lee. And today I've got Gal Borenstein with me, who is the owner of the Borenstein Group, commonly called BG or TBG. Gal is very well known throughout the Beltway, around the Beltway, for marketing, sales, and strategy for organizations, small businesses, and large enterprise to market into the federal government as well as state and local. He also has a commercial capability within his organization as well. So I full disclosure, Gal was one of the first phone calls that I made, one of the first referrals that I had when I was learning how to spell federal, when I was tasked with growing the federal business for my former client/employer. And so Gal and I spent many, many hours together, getting me ramped up on what I needed to know. And so for that, I still thank Gal for that today. So we're going to be paying it forward. And today I have asked Gal to sit down with all of us and say, as marketers, as practitioners, in supporting the federal government, what do we need to be doing differently to get new programs within the federal government, and what, especially for small businesses, what do those small businesses who are graduating from 8A, the climate's got to be shifting for them as well. So if you're not getting acquired, now what, right? So let's start with first things first. Gal, why don't you just give us like a 30,000 foot view of how long you've been on that in this space and what your key focus is?
Well, despite my youth and inexperience, I've been doing this for the past 25 years. And the Borenstein Group was born out of the need for to have somebody that would champion the small to middle market companies in the Washington, D.C. area, predominantly in the technology plus professional services arena, where I saw the need for that. And fast forward 25 years later, that has not changed. The majority of our economy in the government contracting industry is really the small to mid-sized companies that have started with very nimble environments, with very little money, but with ingenuity and authenticity and really kind of a desire to be successful. And really kind of our job at the Borenstein Group, being a branding, marketing, communication agency, is to transition with them and learn how to help them succeed as the environment changes constantly. So to give you a very quick example, 25 years ago, I remember an 8A company that was one of my first clients. Their name was Pragmatics. And Pragmatics was an 8A company that was started by a very smart scientist. And they had a trifold brochure. And they called us to create the first marketing brochure for their company. But it was a different world. It was 1995, 96. And fast forward, today, Pragmatics is a $200 million plus company that is still owned and operated by the same scientist, who's now leading the thought leadership part of the company. But we got to rebrand them twice during that period, and seeing how they started with humble beginning, and that they have not changed their morals, their ethics, and how they really kind of viewed themselves is really kind of important, and what anchors us to the fact that even when you're kind of advertising and you're branding, it's all about authenticity, and it's about building something that is very connected and aligned not only with yourself, but with the people that you are communicating with, in order to create that connection. Because at the end of the day, whether it's a product or a service, people buy from people. And if you're not humanizing your brand, you're making a big mistake, especially in technology, which is the majority of the economy in the DC area.
Yeah, that's true. So the authenticity does ring true across all sales and marketing, especially today. So what advice are you giving? Let's take a look at the advice that you're giving to these small businesses whether they are just starting out or even if they are about ready to graduate? What's the difference between those two stages, and what marketing strategy advice are you giving each of those audiences?
Let's kind of start with the first group, which is really kind of how do you start in today's environment and get ahead of the game of being looked upon as you just started, because it's just like a job, right? When you go to the job market and you just graduated from college, chances are that when you go to an interview, people say, well, you don't have experience, so we can't hire you. And when you go to get experience, they say, well, you can't get that experience because you don't have a job. So what typically happens is that companies, especially in the startup mode, and when I say startup, I mean any kind of 8A companies that have established themselves, the main challenge is really to make sure that you present yourself in a manner that breeds and communicates success from the beginning, and really kind of take a psychological approach or a cognitive psychological approach to saying, what are people thinking of me, or what are they likely to be thinking of me when they find out that I'm new? And then address those objections through branding and through marketing communications effectively to eliminate those objections. So to give you a very quick example, a company that just started about a year ago came to us and say, we're new 8A, we just got certified. Our two principals are coming from DARPA, which is a huge thing. They're very, very smart scientists that did with advanced analytics and research in AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And suddenly they found themselves, hey, we were DARPA, and now suddenly we're nobody. Nobody knows who we are. Our company's called ABC to protect the innocent, for the example. But what else can we do? And the answer really came down to three things. Number one, if you don't have the corporate credentials yet, there's no reason that you can't recast your individual credentials and experience and transport them or parlay them into the skill sets that the company has, especially if you're a startup that needs that to show that you have experience. Because if you don't show that you have experience, why would anybody take a chance on you? So this is called preempting the psychology of what someone is looking for. Because if somebody's looking at you and they're asking the question, how would or should I trust you? They're asking, do you have experience? Question one. Well, yes, they had experience, but they said that was when we were working for DARPA, for example. What did you do at DARPA? Well, we did advanced analytics and artificial intelligence and machine learning. Well, where are you showing it? In your marketing materials and on your website, which is your marketing material, if you will. And then the second part was, how are you presenting yourself in terms of innovation? What are you bringing to the table that is differentiating you from the other 108 A's that got registered last month on the SBA site? And the answer that typically a company has, well, we want to make money. We're entrepreneurs. We have a great idea that can innovate something for the government. And that's not good enough. What you have to do is think specifically about a smaller pond where you already have knowledge base and you already have the opportunity to really kind of take it and expand your circle, but from within. So to kind of use the consistent example of DARPA, or whether it's Department of Labor, it doesn't really matter. Start with what you know. So if you're interested in expanding your business, start with your strength, not your weaknesses, and certainly not with the areas where you have no idea how to go about having a conversation, because that will slow down your ability to generate the revenues that will allow you to build the bed of cash that sustains the time that it takes to really hunt in government, which is forever. Sometimes it might take 6 months, a year, or 2 years. So, and bless you in the spirit of times. The second group of people, which are the people that are already established and have been successful, face the same dilemma, but from a completely opposite point of view. The problem of graduating, I always tell people when they get to the point, and we have multiple clients that are what we call very successful Inc. 5000 small businesses that are reaching kind of that point of revenue inflection where they will lose their small business status or their 8A status or any of their status that allowed them the economic advantage in procurement. And I asked them, so who's going to be your competitor today and who's going to be your competitor tomorrow? And the short answer that everybody finds out is that when you're a small business under that criteria, you stay within a pond of people that are what we call manageable because you get to know them and they become what we call either your ankle biters, your friends, but you know how to deal with them. Once you kind of reach that threshold and you're able to grow beyond that, I always tell people, laughingly so, or ironically so, congratulations, but also my condolences, because now you are competing against middle market companies that could be a $500 million company, which the government will define as a middle market company, and also a $3 billion company that are all going after the same exact procurement. And the question is, now you've become, again, the little fish that has to compete against a big gorilla or a big elephant or a big shark that has a lot more capabilities than you do. So it's incumbent upon you to really re-examine the terrain again and not to assume that because you are now in the middle market, you're actually going to be successful if you don't change your ways of communicating your brand. So we focus with those companies on making sure that we provide proof points through marketing, through branding, through public relations, through social media, and a combination of strategy behind it, communication strategy, on how to make sure that you are looked upon when you compete against the biggest company, that you looked upon as a safe choice. Because if you're not a safe choice and the competition is about who should get the contract based on the size, you got to make sure that you look like you're playing for the part. If you are competing to being the most innovative choice, are you competing by showing your innovation? Or are you hiding it or assuming that people know what it is? Well, we find out most government contractors spend little to no time articulating their case studies, their success stories, because somebody told them 20 years ago that the government does not allow a case study about the performance that they had doing something for the government, which couldn't be further than the truth. Because in reality, all programs, unless they're done for the intelligence community and are classified, could be found on GovWin, could be found on Google. You'll find the name of the program. And if the program is there and you've done something, and as long as it's within the procurement regulations, of course, and you whether it's IT or software or services, why shouldn't you be talking about what you've done in a positive way, in an appropriate way, and make sure that potential customers in the government know that, for example, you achieved mission outcomes, such as, for example, you've done it faster, better, cheaper, you saved the government money. Whatever the things that you've done, as long as they're accredited and they follow the regulations of what you can do it. And when you can't mention the name of the government agency in your past performance or your case study on your website, you can still mention what you've done in a context. That's changing the game and empowering a lot of the small to middle market companies that you're talking about to be successful, in a technique that helps them also create the next thing, which is called thought leadership. You have to exercise thought leadership when you're a smaller guy, because you have an opportunity to say, if all things are alike, we're different. And the way we're different is we're thinking about the future. So what we always recommend to people that have any service, it doesn't matter whether it's cleaning services or IT services or scientific endeavors, whatever it may be, somebody is doing something that is 2 or 3 years ahead of you. Start with looking at what they're doing and reflect back and build that capability into your company, and then communicate how you intend to be a player in that market, and then disseminate that information through social media, through blogs, through video casts like this one, through tweets, through white papers that can be distributed with precision-like approach to the 20 decision makers in the government that might be interested in learning that you know something that other companies don't. And that's the biggest thing that I tell small to mid-sized companies, especially now, especially during COVID-19, especially during this time where it looks like all of the traditional marketing techniques are failing and we're kind of running out of opportunities to really kind of use the channels that we used to use.
We'll stop right there. So what are some of the channels that used to work that aren't working now?
Hands-on, hands-off, whatever you want to call it. The two that I would call out is, number one, conferences and trade shows have been pretty much eliminated from the vocabulary for the foreseeable future. I can say that in the past 2 weeks, in the past month, over 10 clients called us and say, hey, all of our conferences have been canceled. What do we do now? Do we just not spend the money? Do we, climb up and do nothing? Do we do something different? And the answer is you move the money into digital marketing, because digital marketing allows you to do things in a measurable way, number one. Number two, you can have 16 different programs, micro programs that you can test. And if 8 of them fail or 10 of them failed and the others succeeded, you're still ahead of the game. And the third thing is you can make very precision-like programs that target specific individuals, where the group has to have 25 decision makers or 100 decision makers, and you don't need a list of 100,000 people to achieve your goal. So digital marketing is really kind of one of those things that in the past were looked upon as an ancillary strategy or a complementary way to get the message out. Now, content is king. And when I say content, I don't mean just white papers and the written word, but I mean videos, anything that you can podcast, anything that you can do to get yourself across the screen and reach out to the target population of interest. The second thing that you can do, which a lot of companies have not done, to my surprise, is to take advantage of the fact that in a time of uncertainty, in a time where people are looking for examples of leadership in a marketplace, I see many, many companies that don't practice corporate social responsibility in a visible way. And then I see companies that do exactly the opposite. They take advantage of the fact that the others don't. So they basically create a social cause, and they take that social cause, align it with their interests in the community, whether it's helping disadvantaged children, whether it's if you're in healthcare, any field that you can think about, and then make sure that you're not just donating, but you're actually helping your community in need. And by branding yourself as a responsible corporate citizen at this moment, in this time right now, whether it's donating food to food shelters and making sure that people know that you've done it, is a great, low-cost, highly effective way of associating yourself with a brand that cares about other people. Because at the end of the day, when people go back to work, they're going to be looking back on Google and Google the company. And if there's a story about your company where you said, okay, employees, you can't come to the office because of COVID, but you drove with your individual cars and donated meals to veterans, or you've done something great for a senior home, or you've done something for to solve a problem for students that couldn't remote distance learn, whatever it is that you've done through IT or through your own skill set. We don't see that enough, and the ones that do it will be remembered when we go back to normal. So again, I would say the first one is take your conference money and transport it into digital marketing. And the second is practice corporate social responsibility, not by just making donations and statements that I call of empty platitudes that say we support this community, but actually engage your employees, engage your community in using your technology potentially to case study and showcase what it is that you do. That's the best way to get free advertising, free PR, free coverage right now. And I'm amazed that more people don't do it.
Why do you think they're not doing it?
I really think that right now we're at that point where a lot of people are paralyzed with fear, and most of it is irrational. But at the same time, irrational fear is rational in the sense that people don't know what's coming next. So they're frozen, and that frozen approach creates a barrier to take action. So what I'm seeing is the same leaders or that actually are saying we're frozen, but we're going to move forward. The same instinctual leadership skills and entrepreneurial skills that made them successful when they were starting up and had $2,000 and not a nickel to their name, as they used to say, and grew into $50 million, $100 million. I know CEOs of companies like that their attitude was, bring it on. You know, this is like World War III to us right now. We can't get the employees to the office. Our clients are not paying our bills. Well, let's turn it on its head and create another American success story. And these are the ones that are going to be successful. And for it's survival of the fittest right now. Yeah. And the worst thing you can do is wait for somebody to tell you what to do. The best thing you can do is try 10 different things, find out what works and what doesn't, put some matrix in the ground, but make sure that you get your message out, because the worst thing that you can do from a marketing and branding perspective, and sorry if I sound like I'm preaching, because I'm very passionate about it, is go to somebody's website and see a press release from March of last year. What does that tell you about the company if you're a procurement officer in the government and you just happen to look at the website? It looks like the company is dead or is not in business anymore if you're looking for a new opportunity. So make sure your press room has new press releases, that your social media is active, that your activity on LinkedIn is being populated by showing that you're still reading the articles about the new technology that is coming out. I'm not saying do it all day, but incorporate it into what you can do to communicate. And of course, make sure that employee engagement is at a high level at this time, not by just having the internal Zoom calls where you have 90 screens on your screen and everybody's watching each other, playing games of interaction, but making sure that you use that for good, for corporate social responsibility, for ideas, and then execute them.
Okay. Boy, this is bringing me back to 2013. It's like taking a master's class in marketing. So we've got about 6 minutes left. So in that time, yes, one of the questions that I'm getting asked frequently is, we want to try different things. We want to do different things. What time do you give it to fail? In other words, how quickly should you recognize failure and try something else? I think that's a really relevant question right now.
It certainly is. There are things that can help mitigate and get a better answer to what you're looking for, which is first, as I told a potential client this morning that has a grandiose idea, was where's your go-to-market plan? A go-to-market plan could be a one-page document that has, this is who I'm trying to market to. And I researched enough to know, if done my homework, that I know their buyer persona. I know who they are. and I know where they typically get their information. If you don't know that, any initiative that you're going to be launching is doomed to fail before you even have a message or a promise. Then second, focus on the promise and ask the question, is your promise believable? And then the third is, do you have a call for action attached to your audience, to your promise? And how do I get what it is that you're selling to me or marketing to me, whether it's a white paper, a webinar, or whatever? Am I making myself easy to purchase from? And what you find is that most of the failures that are happening are not in the consistency or perseverance. It's by failing to answer those three questions. And then once you've answered those three questions, to answer your question directly, nothing works overnight. And there's an old adage or a joke that I'm going to screw up completely, but try to summarize it, where an American tourist visits Buckingham Palace in London, and he's looking at the grass, and he's asking the gardener who's just watering the grass there, an old man, gee, why is your grass so much greener than ours in America? And the British gentleman looks back at him and says, we don't do anything different. We just water the grass every day for the past 400 years.
Every day for 400 years.
Every day for the past 400 years. Translation to today's environment, you, with digital marketing, you have the ability to measure engagement in all type of levels. And typically, I would say that any program that you don't give 90 to 120 days to work is not going to work, even if you answer the questions that I just described and answered. But it's not a bad thing to have more than one pilot going at the same time, simply because you don't know necessarily what will work and what won't. But a sure thing that will be absolutely true is that if you don't try, you will fail.
Right.
So innovation and disruption right now is not about necessarily inventing something new. It's about looking at your surrounding, the pond that you're familiar with, and say, what can the bigger companies provide that I can? And then how do I make myself accessible to the people that I'm trying to sell, with the idea that I can be either faster or better or more accessible, and then make sure that that information is upfront and not hiding on page 6 of your website and takes 4 clicks to get to, which is user interface and user experience.
So I do want to drill down on the faster, better, cheaper thing, because as you taught me very early on, cheaper isn't always the answer for the federal government.
Absolutely not. In fact, it's the opposite. Creating premium positioning is all about thinking about how to differentiate yourself. And if you can be put into, I always use that metaphor, if you can take your product or service and then you can put it into an Excel sheet and the only difference is price, you failed. You failed to differentiate yourself. Best value always wins. And best value is another construct, psychological construct, that says someone was able to articulate their message in a way that says we have more experience that is relevant to your specific federal agency, for example, or we have scientists, or we have a technology, or we have a methodology or a process that shows better return on investment. And they front-loaded their presentation to convince the client and set the agenda of how they're being evaluated. You have to tell your story, not the other way around. If you wait for your story to be understood without you leading by example from point A to point B to point C, you're guaranteed to be put into that Excel sheet, and then you don't have a differentiation. And if you don't have a differentiation, you can certainly fall into the category of being what we call in government, lowest price technically acceptable, which is another way of saying cheapest.
Yeah, and that's not a place that you necessarily want to be. So we've got about 30 seconds left, actually 15. I want to just say suggest one thing to who's ever going to be watching this is that all of these things that you've said make a lot of sense. They almost seem somewhat common sense, right? We should know this stuff. However, when you're sitting too close to your own product or service or company, it's hard to see the obvious because you're just too close to it. And so this is why it's important to be a little bit humble and say that you need help, right? And this is when you reach out to the Gals of the world and say, take a look at what I've been looking at for far too long because I'm missing the obvious. So I mean, that was probably the best advice that I was ever given in launching new businesses, which I have had multiple over the years. But I'll tell you, Gal, it was, you shaved off many, many years of mistakes, right? If we try to go it on our own.
Absolutely. And the best test in 2 seconds that I can give you is that, to paraphrase General Patton from World War II, if everybody thinks alike, somebody isn't thinking. And
That's right.
Which means if people that you're surrounding yourself with are telling you you're doing great, get rid of them and find people that are telling you how to do things better. Because if you don't self-improve all the time and you're not being successful, that's the problem right there. You're thinking alike in a group think.
Yeah. All right. Well, that 30 minutes went by very fast, Gal. Thank you so very much. If you can hang on a second, I want to thank everybody for joining me again with Live with Lee. And this will be posted on LinkedIn as well as YouTube. And so we will see you next week and more to come on that event. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.